Welcome to the Let's Talk Crypto podcast, where we discuss the latest Bitcoin, blockchain, and digital asset news.
Today we are going to discuss the basics of Bitcoin and blockchain. One of the questions that I get asked a lot is, how does a cryptocurrency or Bitcoin wallet work? Which leads to the next question, how does an address work? And when they dig a little bit deeper, they come back and ask, what is a private key and what is a public key? These are the basic things that I'd like to cover today. Let's start with you, Suyash. What is a wallet?
A wallet has several meanings. It depends on which level of abstraction you want to define a wallet. But from let's say a general user perspective, a wallet is just a software which allows you to store your funds. Let's take the example of Bitcoin. So basically what a wallet is, it allows you to keep your funds, your Bitcoin funds in that wallet. Very similar to a physical wallet where you keep your money. The big difference being that a wallet doesn't really keep your Bitcoin, okay, or any other cryptocurrency for that matter. It rather keeps the keys to access those funds. So basically, a wallet is a wallet of keys to access your funds. That's basically what a wallet is for.
Okay, so that makes sense. So basically, if you've got the keys and it fits, you get access to your funds.
Absolutely correct.
What are keys?
Okay, keys. So basically, keys are what allows you to get access to your funds. Something to remember in any blockchain and cryptocurrency is that you don't store or you don't maintain the cryptos, the funds yourself. It's stored on the blockchain, so you don't have like a physical access to that specific fund. What you have is,
well, I think it's easier to think of it this way, is that the coins are not really coins. It's all digital inputs and outputs on a big ledger. And all it is a record of who has what on that ledger, and that ledger being the blockchain. So basically the way to verify that those keys are under your ownership, that those coins or those outputs are under your ownership, is by signing with your private keys. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
So if I wanted to send you money, Slava, how would I know where to send it?
So as Suyash was saying, a wallet has several layers of meaning. So when I think of a wallet, I think of a wallet address, which is a top of the spear, if that metaphor works, top of the spear. Top of the spear, which is something very public, which I can provide you or anyone else, so that you can send the coins to that specific address. It does not identify me as a person, and it's just one of the several elements, if we're talking about Bitcoin blockchain, that allow you to identify ownership of the inputs and outputs, as well as manage them successfully. So the short answer to your question is that, first of all, I'm going to go to my wallet, it could be software, get the wallet address, and send you the wallet address. Then you go.
Okay, but wait right there. Can a wallet only have one address?
Absolutely not. You can change the wallet address after every transaction. And the way it works is that you need a combination of public and private keys. So what is the difference between the public and private keys? Just like you guys mentioned, a private key allows you to sign transactions so that you can verify the ownership of the account on the ledger. The public key allows you to encrypt the message, and only private key can decrypt that message. The other function of the combination of the private and public key allows you to generate a wallet address. I believe that is characteristic of some blockchains. I think for the Bitcoin blockchain, wallet address is a shortened version of the public key. So the combination of the private and public key allows you to create as many wallet addresses as you like to ensure that anonymity is taking place.
Okay. So basically, you would give me a public address. I would input that into my wallet, the software, which would then check if I have enough money to cover that transaction in terms of outputs. I would send it to that address. Your software would then verify on the blockchain whether it's received those funds and send.
Yes. And the sending change back is very important because that allows to prevent double spending. Something we talked about in the previous episode, where you can double spend the same amount by giving it to, by sending that amount to two entities. Another distinction, which I think is important to make to those who are making, who are learning about blockchain cryptocurrencies, is that you never share private key. It stays with you. You do not disclose it. If you're in America, it's something like social security number. You never tell it to anyone. Whereas you can share public key, and because that has a function when it comes to transacting on blockchain.
Okay. Suyash, do you know how private keys and public keys are generated technically?
Basically, something to understand is that the process starts with the generation of a private key. Okay, that's the first step, and from the private key you generate the public key, and this combination of keys allows you to then generate a whole set of addresses that you can use, and these addresses are linked to your private and public keys. And a lot of wallets, especially in the Bitcoin blockchain, can be categorized as either deterministic or non-deterministic wallets.
What does that mean?
It just means that, for example, deterministic wallets are wallets that contain private keys that are all derived from a common seed. A seed is basically a set of words that you use as a password. Let's say as a password when you first initialize your wallet.
Okay. I think I know what you mean, like the mnemonic words, which are sort
Correct.
of randomly generated words.
You could say exactly. It uses some hash functions to generate the public key from the private key. And as soon as you get this, then you can create like multiple public addresses that you can use for transactions. Actually, it's really a good idea to use a separate address for each transaction that you make, either it's a payment or when you receive funds. It's usually regarded as a good practice.
Yes, correct. And I believe, I mean, the great thing is we don't really have to worry about all this. All this goes on in the background. We merely need to input the right address that we want to send our money to. I want to send 1 Bitcoin to Slava, and I send it. In the background, most of the latest wallets nowadays are generating new addresses for the change to come back. And if I'm receiving money, they generate a new address. I can use a new address for each one. So, for the average user out there, it's not really imperative for them to understand deep down how it works, but it is interesting nonetheless for us to discuss it. It brings another question that I believe a listener would ask, and that is, with all these addresses, and you're generating new addresses all the time, as you said, it's a good security practice, and a lot of the wallets do it automatically anyway. With all these addresses, if I get you to send me 1 Bitcoin, Suyash, and tomorrow Slava sends me 1 Bitcoin, and the next day somebody else sends me other Bitcoin, that's 3 Bitcoins. I've given 3 separate addresses. My wallet will show a balance for all of those addresses, or does it throw away the previous address? How do I make sure, how do I not lose the Bitcoins that are sent to old addresses? And when a new address is sent, is used, what happens to the old address?
Actually, the old addresses, whenever you create a new address, these addresses, as we explained earlier, these addresses are tied to your public key. The public key is tied to your private key. So whatever happens, these addresses will always be accessible through the private key. So on the other hand, this means that you can always access the funds in these addresses. And since you are the only one who has access to the private keys, you're the only one who can access these funds in these addresses. And in terms of wallet, the user won't necessarily see all of these layers of abstraction what he'll see is that, okay, he has free Bitcoin in his wallet. And then, of course, these free Bitcoins are divided into three different addresses. But for the end user, it doesn't matter a lot from where are the funds in terms of addresses.
Okay. So now, to take back that scenario, I've got the 3 Bitcoins. You sent me one, Slava sent me one, and someone else has sent me another one. And I want to pay someone else 3 Bitcoins now. So what you're saying, just to summarize, is that I'll open my wallet and I'll just see the 3 Bitcoins there and I can send it. And what my wallet will do in the background is it will sign the 3 different addresses outputs, enabling me to send a total amount of 3 Bitcoins. So in other words, the output to the person I'm sending the money to will have 3 Bitcoins, but it will have 3 inputs.
Correct. And one interesting thing is that actually if we drill down a bit in terms of the addresses and keys, if for example you have 3 addresses and each address have 1 Bitcoin as the example that you mentioned, and you want to send 1.5 Bitcoin to Slava. So what will happen, the wallet, what it will do, it will take the first address and check how much is the balance. So it's 1 Bitcoin, so it's not enough. It will take the second address and it will see, okay, you have 1 more Bitcoin and the total is 2 Bitcoin. What the wallet will do, it will spend the whole of the 2 Bitcoins, okay, and of which 1.5 will be sent to Slava and 0.5 will be returned back to you. The point is that it's like you have $100 note or something like that, and when you spend all of it, okay, and the funds are then redistributed back to you. And that's the same principle for Bitcoin and for many other cryptocurrencies.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That helps a lot. If I did give somebody $100 at a shop and I was buying something for, let's just say, $20, they could give me back 4 $20 bills. That would be my change. However, my whole balance of $100 was given to them out of that wallet or that address, and they return the change. In much of the same way, what you're saying is, if I had a total of 3 Bitcoins with bits of it split up in different addresses, it would use the full amount in each address to cover the amount that I'm spending, but it can't use a fraction of one of those amounts within the address. It sends the full amount to make up the total that I'm trying to pay. And if it's in surplus, which it likely would be, although there could be a rare instance where it's the exact amount, but it likely would be a surplus, it would return back the difference as unspent, as change. Okay. Then we mentioned the seed, and I know that they've simplified things further from when we started off in Bitcoin back in the day. They made it simpler by reducing this down to a bunch of words that are actually easy to remember or you can write down. Could you explain a little bit more about that? Is there a simplified way of understanding how that works? And then after that, what are the best security practices around that? And what are the pros and cons, the dangers behind having these seed words?
So mnemonic phrase or mnemonic seed is basically a list of words which is randomly generated within the parameters of the blockchain. And what it does is that allows you to save and recover a Bitcoin address, and to be more specific, if I understand it correctly, private keys. So instead of memorizing or writing down a very long address, which is a long string of numbers and figures, you can write down this, I believe it's 12 words, and that's gonna keep your funds secured. So if you lose your wallet, in the sense that your phone gets stolen or broken, you can just get another device, input the seed, prove that you are the owner of that account on the blockchain, and manage your funds.
Okay. So the dangers behind that is if somebody else finds those words, they can also generate your wallet. Even if you've still got yours with you, they can generate a copy of your wallet and are able to sign transactions and basically steal your money.
It is as much danger as the beauty of blockchain. Whereas before the blockchain, you had to rely on a third party to make sure that your funds are secure, to make sure that your funds are secure. Right now, you can take responsibility for the ownership for yourself, and by storing the seed, the private key or the seed. But there is definitely a danger of you losing the access, or someone is stealing that information from you. And we've heard a lot of stories when that happened. Millions and millions of dollars in Bitcoin are locked on the blockchain because someone lost or forgot the key.
Yeah, I mean, there's nobody to call, right? There's no helpline. There's no customer service that you can call up and say, hey, I forgot my password or I forgot my seed.
Yeah, and something that I would like to add is that in terms you mentioned that security part, Wes, the seeds are actually it's an industry standard that are supported by most hardware wallets like Trezor and other hardware wallets. What it allows you to do is if you lose your wallet, it allows you to really to restore all your keys from that specific list of words. So basically, that list of words is normally they choose normally a 12-word list or sometimes a 24-word list, and these words are actually from a predefined dictionary of 2048 words, if I'm not wrong. So the chance of getting right your 12 or 24 word, let's say, password is extremely low, and that allows for a high level of security. And these words are like, since they are predefined, they are kind of words that can easily be remembered. So there's a compromise between the security part and the usability part, but the use of mnemonic words is really like a very good practice that has been added to wallets in the industry.
Sure. But it brings to mind the fact that on one hand, while it is secure and safe and you're able to, if you lose your device or if your hard drive is corrupted or God forbid your device is stolen or whatever happens, that you're able to instantly go and restore your private and public keys and your wallet and therefore have access to your funds. But it also brings the user into danger in terms of having to be actually finally responsible for their funds, for their value. Whereas I'll give an example. If you lost your password to your internet banking, it would be a hassle, but you would be able to recover the password, whether it be automatically online or going into the bank branch. There would be a third party, or should I say a service, customer care that could help you. If, on the other hand, you lost that piece of paper when talking about Bitcoin now, with your words on it, it means that anybody could go and restore your wallet and therefore steal your funds. I think that in itself is something to consider. Likewise, if you did write down your words, where do you keep them? It's like having money under your mattress. So it's quite interesting. And I think it's just something that, up to now, we're not used to having that level of responsibility bestowed upon us. It's a good thing overall, I believe, but it is something for the user to be more security conscious about, more so than, securing a password on a computer, which you can recover. If you lose this piece of paper, it's gone. There's no guessing.
It's a great question. What are the extra layers of securities and protocols that you as a user can implement in order to make sure that even if something happens to the piece of paper where you wrote the seed, your funds are going to be safe? One of the ideas that I have, and there's several of them, and I'm sure everyone can find their own way of addressing the issue. But so one of the things that I came up with is that you don't really have to hide the piece of paper, or you even have the piece of paper. You can take a book, any book, let's say a dictionary, a specific issue of the dictionary that probably contains all of the words that are part of the mnemonic phrase, upload it online or have access to it online, and then create indices for the words. So for example, if my first word on the mnemonic on the mnemonic phrase is on the page 4 and it's like 6 from the top, I'll create an index which is gonna say 6 4. right? Which indicates that it's just, I have to open 6 page and look for the 4th page from the top. So you can create a set of rules like this to make sure, because they're easier to remember than 12 words, at least for me.
That is a really great idea. I mean, by splitting up the information, the data like that, it's just an extra layer of security, a further sort of hurdle for the person to get through. And if I understand correctly, what you're saying is having some sort of document, whether it be a dictionary or whatever, perhaps online, perhaps in the cloud, and having a second note and index, as you said, separated, maybe physical, somewhere else that you keep, which means nothing to, doesn't mean anything to anybody without knowing what that index is referring to. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. A more complicated version of that would be assign different values to notes in a specific music piece. I play piano, and so every note has a value, and then if you put combinations of several notes, that can create a similar instrument, and you can create an index of that and keep 2 separate, and no one ever will guess what these 2 documents mean.
Sure. The next thing I think of is, what happens if something happens to you? What happens to your family or your next of kin when you've put this high level of security in place and you're not around to unlock the key as such or put it back together?
I did not find the answer to this question, but it's a very, very real question to me, because just a few months ago, I was planning to jump with a parachute from the plane. And that's been on my list of to-do things forever. And I'm very excited to do that. And a friend of mine stopped me and is like, what are you going to do with all your coins? Like, you have to think of the way to transfer information. He was honestly suggesting that you should provide the keys to your friends and family. And I paused there for a second. The Bitcoin is not, how should I put it? I would have to spend a lot of energy into educating my mom of what is the private keys and how to use them and how to recover funds in the case I die.
I think that applies to all of us. I think we would all be quite challenged by having to explain that. One of the things, I mean, without splitting it up into musical notes and indices, and that, one of the things which one can do to secure it is to give sections of your words to different people. However, if one of them happens to expire or lose the document that you've entrusted them with, you could have a problem. So the answer there is to give it to 2 or 3, the same words to 2 or 3 people split up. So I could give the first 5 words to 2 or 3 people, another 5 words to another 2 or 3 people, and the final 2 words, if it's a 12-word seed, to another 2 or 3 people, just to have backup, and also to ensure that especially you don't want to give it to one and then they steal your funds. Hopefully it's someone you can trust, of course, but with this personal responsibility, you always want to be double sure. So you split up the words so that it would take collaboration for the funds to be stolen. And likewise, if one person loses it, it won't be the end of the world. But there's lots of different things you can do to secure the funds. But about 1.5 years ago, a friend of ours, in fact, Suyash, as well, a friend of yours too, passed away this December 2017, on the 2nd of December. And he had, I wouldn't say a substantial amount, it's a relative term anyway, but he had funds locked on a trezor, and he passed away suddenly, unfortunately, with a motorcycle accident. But to cut a long story short, his family had no idea what to do with this trezor, and they did ask myself and Suyash to help recover the trezor. I have the trezor here. In fact, we were not able to get into the trezor because he had set a password, which is an extra layer of security, on the trezor. To access the trezor, it actually required a PIN code, and we don't even know how long the PIN code is. It could be 4, 5, 6 numbers long. In any event, he also had on his desk before he passed away, and in his drawers and in his books everywhere, seed words, mnemonic seed words all over the place. We've tried all of them and none of them were correct. I do suspect that he put them in a different order, or he Because that's the thing too, to be able to know, maybe he mixed them up, or he was that way inclined that he would have taken an extra step of precaution. But his one thing that he didn't do was tell anybody what to do in the event of him expiring. So that's a very real life situation we find ourselves in. It's 2 years later. I have not been able to get into that Trezor, and neither has anybody else that I've given it to. And I've sent it around the world, and the data I have around the world, to people who specialize into unlocking these things and also unlocking, seed words in it. And nobody has been able to do it.
Yeah, interesting. And just to recap that, the Bitcoin blockchain, especially the Bitcoin blockchain, is very unforgiving in these circumstances. I mean, the fact that it is a decentralized and trustless environment, it demands that a certain level of access is needed. And if you don't have that access, irrespective of your circumstances, it simply doesn't give you anything. So that's the, let's say, the compromise that you need to have with a decentralized system. Actually, if I'm not wrong, last year there was a big Canadian company, a cryptocurrency exchange, if I'm not wrong, which had around 140 million USD worth of Bitcoin locked in their hard wallets, and their CEO died. So they couldn't get access to that fund. So
Quadriga, that's correct. Yeah, there's a lot of funny stories behind that too, whether he even passed away or not. But true, if an exchange, God forbid, only has one person carrying the keys and or the seed words, and they expire, and there's no protocol in place. Yeah, all the funds will be gone. Even with an infrastructure like that and lots of resources at hand, it's next to or near impossible to unlock those funds. So quite right, unforgiving is the word.
Yeah, but I also believe that with the way blockchains are evolving, maybe with the use of smart contracts, we could set up like time locks or things like that. If that after X amount of time or X amount of blocks, you do not sign in to confirm that you're still alive or things like that, funds could be redistributed, or and which would be an opt-in solution. So this, I think, in the long run would be something that will become quite prevalent.
Something we'll cover on a later episode, but one of the ways that I believe is very effective in terms of security and what you just mentioned is to have a multi-signature wallet where you can have like a 3 of 5 or a 2 of 5 or a 1 of 10. Just depending on how you structure it and what protocol you put in place, you can really secure funds and make it so that, in the event of something happening to you, trusted third parties are able to handle procedures in your absence. Another question I have is, if I am giving you my public address because I want to receive a payment from you, Slava, why can't you, with that public address, determine what my private key is?
So earlier we talked about the functions of the private key, public address, and the wallet address. And so there's one thing which we didn't mention during earlier discussion is that you can generate the public key from the private key and the wallet address from the public key, the combination of two, private and public. However, a very important point which allows to secure your funds and identity is that you cannot deduct or guess your private key if I know your public key. So it's a one-way street in a way that you can create. If I know your public key, I will not be able to find out your private key, and therefore I will not be able to take control over your funds. And so that is done using cryptography and something which is called hashing, and that secures the funds.
Perfect. It helps a lot. I mean, just to simplify that, basically it's sort of one-way calculation. So A plus B equals C, but you can't just take C and minus B to get A.
Yes, and your examples are so great. That's absolutely right. Because you can compile C in many different ways, and so the values of A and B can have multiple values. So it's really, really hard and unproductive to guessing what values of A and B are if you know the value of C.
Okay. I mean, this takes us back. I mean, if we had to, which we won't go into more detail, this will be to do with elliptical curve cryptography, where you've got a generator point on a curve and you're multiplying it by that every time. So that point could be different, and without knowing that, you can't reverse the calculation. Okay, so you're pretty safe in giving a user or a person who's going to pay you an address. They're not going to be able to work out your private key and your seeds and just hijack your funds, hijack your wallets from underneath you. Another question that I thought of for the user is, you always hear people talking about hot wallets and cold wallets and cold storage. That's another term that you hear thrown around a lot. And I can just imagine a user when they first get into the crypto space and they're exploring around and they're hearing about cold storage and cold wallets. And I just get these visions of them putting their phone in the freezer or something to make sure that their Bitcoins are safe while they sleep at night. Obviously we know what it's all about, but in simple terms, and we can go into a little bit more detail, what does it mean? Hot wallet, cold wallet, and then after that, what are the pros and cons of each? Why would there be a hot wallet and a cold wallet?
Well, for me, let's say from a high level perspective, I would say that a cold wallet is a wallet which is not connected to the internet. Let's say it like this. So basically, no external systems can connect to the cold wallet. So a very concrete example would be like a hardware wallet like Trezor or Ledger or similar hardware wallets, where the way you use it is that when you need to do a transaction, you need to send funds or things like that, you connect the hardware wallet to your computer, you do that transaction, and then you disconnect. This means that your private keys are stored in the hardware wallet, which is not connected to the internet. So this is an example, a concrete example of what a cold wallet is. A hot wallet, on the other hand, is, I would say, is a wallet software running on a system which is connected to the internet. So a very valid question would be, why would we need that? If we can do something from the cold wallet, why do we need a hot wallet? So it becomes very useful in cases like when you're doing ICO, or if you're in crypto exchange and things like that, where you need your wallet to transfer funds quickly and to receive funds quickly. So hot wallets become important for automatically processing payments, and these are the main uses of hot wallets.
When you say automatically process payments, would that be without human intervention on the hot wallet side? In other words, if I was an exchange and I wanted to process a payment, I wouldn't have to physically have somebody there to verify it as such. So it would be a hot wallet. Everything's online. If it meets all the requirements, it releases the payment. The wallet sends the funds. I can see the dangers in that. Whereas a cold wallet, one needs to bridge the gap. In other words, the private keys, which is used to sign the transaction, are kept off the computer or off the online device, whether it be a server, a phone, or whatever it might be, and needs to be used to sign the transaction offline. And once it's signed, that approved or verified transaction can then be broadcast onto the blockchain. Does that make sense?
Absolutely correct. And just one thing to add is that cold wallets, normally when we're talking about hardware wallets and things like that, they are very limited systems. Like, they have been designed to do some things very well, but they can't do a lot more than that. So basically, they are very limited computer systems which are constrained by what they can do. And the reason behind why they do that is the less things that a hardware can do, the more secure it is. So that's why it's sometimes very difficult to do something which is very limited, but instead use something that has a lot of functions. For example, you hear a lot of people in the past, especially in the past, who were setting up their wallets on Raspberry Pi and things like. Even if this could have been used as a hardware wallet, systems like Raspberry Pi and so on, they are very open systems, and they are a large avenue of different attacks and malware that can steal funds from them.
Okay. What about a light client, a wallet that is like on a mobile phone. What is the difference between that and a wallet that, for example, a Trezor? Besides having cold storage and hot wallet, what other differences or trade-offs are there?
So a light client, if I understand it correctly, is a wallet that does not connect to the blockchain directly, but rather communicates with a node, with a centralized node. So with the light client, you maintain even less autonomy, and you put responsibilities on someone else's shoulder as far as managing funds.
Okay, so in other words, if you had a mobile wallet that was classified as a light client, you wouldn't be verifying your transactions directly with and interacting directly with the blockchain. You would be interacting with someone else's node, who is then in turn interacting with the blockchain. What is an easy way of verifying a payment? Slava, you've said you've sent me a payment now. I don't see anything yet in my wallet. You've just pushed send. How do I know that you have made a payment? Screenshots can be edited. Perhaps I need to know that you've actually done a payment pretty soon. How do I go about that?
Well, there could be several reasons as to why the payment is not showing. The first one is obvious. I could have done a mistake and I sent it to a wrong address. Blockchain in general is a trustless open ledger. You do not have to trust to another person. So in the case that you described, we can do a very simple thing. We can go to a blockchain explorer, and there are many of them for different blockchains, and enter the wallet address and check the status of all transactions related to this that were sent or directed to that address. And we can see the status of the transaction. And it might be the case that if I send you the transaction and you don't see it appearing in your wallet, something wrong with your hardware or software on your end. And we can clearly verify that on the blockchain using something which is called the Block Explorer.
Okay, so if I went to a Block Explorer, I presume it would be a website. I would type in or paste in either my address or a transaction ID, and I should get all the information related to that transaction if it exists. And I believe that even if it isn't a confirmed transaction, in other words, one block hasn't been mined yet, it should still appear, but as an unconfirmed transaction.
And one more thing I can add is I usually get a lot of queries like people who are using exchanges, who have their funds in exchanges and have been sent funds. They can't see the funds on the exchanges, but they can see the funds on explorers. It is very important to know the different criteria these exchanges use. For example, some exchanges wait for at least 10 or even sometimes more confirmations before they show that they have received some funds. So even if you can see that on Block Explorers, you have, for example, in Bitcoin, you have 6 confirmations. You can't still see it on your wallet in your crypto exchange. So most of the time, it's just a case of checking the number of confirmations that need to happen before these funds can be shown. And most of the cases, it's just a case of waiting for some time, like 10, 15, 30 minutes before you can see your funds.
Okay, so I mean, that's not a flaw in the Bitcoin or the blockchain that you're using. Sometimes it's just a policy of that particular exchange or wallet or whatever service you're using to only count it as a concluded transaction and show you that the balance has arrived or been sent after so many confirmations. Therefore, it's more of an extra layer that service or application is putting on top of the Bitcoin blockchain.
Absolutely, yeah.
I remember we wouldn't count a transaction as being confirmed until we saw 6 confirmations on the Bitcoin blockchain. And most exchanges, when you were depositing Bitcoin funds into your wallet on that exchange, they wouldn't accept less than 6 confirmations on the Bitcoin blockchain. However, that has now changed. A lot of the leading exchanges around the world will accept 1 confirmation. That's just a testament to how strong the security is now, how high the hash rate is on the Bitcoin blockchain, that they have a lot of faith in it not being rolled back or there being a split within 1 or 2 confirmations. All right, guys, thanks. I think we've gone to sufficient depth on how wallets work, how addresses work, how they're generated, what are public keys, private keys, seed words, some great tips for security. And I think the user will get a good grip on these basic items, and look forward to talking about more basic items in the next episode.